Welcome to Good afternoon and welcome to Going Bialystic. My name is Carol Teagarden, and on behalf of my co-chair, Carol Yunker, and the Temple Sinai Women's Chavurah Committee, we are pleased to present this fascinating program. First cousins Iris Sroll of Rochester and Russ Sroll of Los Angeles are members of the Rivka family Verband, a family circle formed in 1910 by recently arrived Jewish immigrants from the Bialystic region of northeastern Poland. Named after Ira's grandmother, the Rivka family settled in Chicago, where Russ and Ira's fathers were born. The family still gathers every 5 years in the Chicago area to celebrate its rich heritage. The 100th anniversary of Verband Jubilee in 2010 attracted over 350 members.
Wow.
In Going Bialystic, we celebrate the roots of the Rivka family and also the larger family of Eastern European Jews who left their homeland to seek a better life in America and later in Israel. We also remember those who stayed behind, many of whom lost their lives during the Holocaust, a massive tragedy that we will never forget. The history of European and American Jewry has been marked by many ups and downs, to say the least. This film is Russ and Ira's gift to Jewish people throughout the world who have overcome obstacles and contributed mightily to the societies in which we live and will continue to do so well into the future. Please stay muted until after the film, when Ira, who's here with us today, will be available for questions and discussion. And in appreciation of Russ and Ira's generosity in sharing their film with us today, a donation will be made in their honor to Willow, which is a shelter for abused and battered women. So thank you very much. And Esther, I think we are ready for...
I will do a screen share. I just want to make sure everybody's muted. And Pam Singer, it doesn't look like you're muted. Is there anyone else, Carol, that you see?
I think I'll just go through and mute anybody.
Okay, Marlene's
including
good.
Myself.
Okay, I have to be on because, and if you will all pray to the Zoom gods, I will do the screen sharing. This is about a 40-minute video.
And I will mute myself.
Ever since we were children, most of us in the Rivka family have heard about Velvel Marinker, that melodious name of our common ancestor who lived in the first half of the 19th century. We know almost nothing about him, and even less about his wife, Chaya Rachel, who survived, we believe, into the early 1880s. But we do know that Velvel was an innkeeper in the tiny hamlet of Malinka, some 20 miles southeast of the capital city of Bialystok, and a few miles east of Zabludowa in what is now northeastern Poland.
Bialystok has been and still is the capital of the Podlaski Voivodeship, or province, near the national boundary with Belarus. It is so large and influential in the history of European Jewry that it should be saved for another presentation unto itself. Today, I'm going to concentrate on 3 communities that were the homes of 3 of our family's 9 branches. Bronsk, which was the home of the Garber and Finkelstein families in Branch 3. Brest-Litovsk, which was the home of the Zuckerman family in Branch 6. And Zabludowa, which was the home of my own Srolevich family, descended from Branch 9. But first, a look at the bigger picture. These communities were all in the Pale of Jewish settlement, a huge area of some 430,000 square miles, about the same size as our western states of Washington, Oregon, Nevada, and California combined. From 1791 to 1917, the Pale comprised the western region of Imperial Russia, in which permanent residency by Jews was allowed and beyond which was mostly forbidden. The arrow indicates the location of Bialystic. The archaic English word pale is derived from the Latin word for stake, implying an area enclosed by a fence or a rigid boundary. In 1882, 500,000 Jews living in rural areas of the Pale were forced to leave their homes and live in towns or townlets. In Yiddish, the word is shtetls. 250,000 Jews living along the western frontier of Russia were moved into the Pale. Almost 750,000 Jews living east of the Pale were moved into the Pale in 1891. Life in the Pale was economically bleak. Tsar Nicholas I ruled from 1825 to 1855, and life for Jews became much more restrictive. Under Tsar Alexander II, who ruled from 1855 to 1881, rights were expanded for rich and educated Jews who could live beyond the Pale, and there were hopes that the Pale might be abolished. When Alexander was assassinated in 1881, and rumors spread that the assassins were Jewish, anti-Jewish sentiment skyrocketed. There were anti-Jewish pogroms from 1881 to 1884, which led to much emigration from the Pale, mainly to the U.S. and Western Europe. But emigration did not keep pace with birth rates, and the Jewish population of the Pale continued to grow. Jews were generally forbidden to engage in agriculture and were thus predominantly merchants, artisans, shopkeepers, and innkeepers, as was our Velvel. This made poverty a serious issue. However, a robust Jewish community welfare system arose. By the end of the 19th century, nearly 1 in 3 Jews were being supported by Jewish welfare organizations, which included providing free medicine, dowries for brides, education for orphans, and kosher food for soldiers. In the mid-19th century, the reign of Tsar Nicholas I was marked by the oppression of religious minorities. In 1827, he introduced compulsory military service for Jews, and severe censorship was imposed on Jewish books. The intensification of conscription into the Tsarist army was particularly loathsome. Decrees called for the forced conscription of Jewish boys into the Russian army. The boys were between the ages of 12 and 18 and were forced to serve for 25 years and sometimes for much longer, during which time every effort was made to convert them to Christianity. The Jewish community regarded this as a death sentence and went to extreme measures, including intentional maiming, to see to it that their boys would not qualify for military service. Political instability was rampant, and in recent centuries the region changed hands more than a dozen times. For example, between the early 1600s through World War II, Podlaskie Voivodeship was controlled by the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, the Kingdom of Prussia, the Russian Empire, the Kingdom of Poland, the German Empire, the Second Polish Republic, and Nazi Germany. The history of Poland is thus marked by many border changes and complicated government transitions. Here is Poland between 1815 and 1918. It was off the map for over 100 years. Once again, the arrow indicates Bialystok. In 1882, 500,000 Jews were living in shtetls within the Pale. In the early 19th century, shtetls were Eastern European market towns, inhabited mostly, but not exclusively, by Jews, and were subject to Russian bureaucracy. Almost 1 million Jews were moved into the Pale from eastern and western border regions, and by 1891, the Pale was home to 1.5 million Jews. During World War I, the Pale lost its rigid hold on the Jewish population when large numbers of Jews fled east into the Russian interior to escape the invading German army. As revolution gripped Russia and Nicholas II abdicated, the Pale was abolished in 1917. Let's now take a look at Bronsk, the last European residence of Branch 3's Garber family. After the partition of Poland in 1795, Bronsk became part of Prussia. Jews were allowed to settle there, and by 1800 numbered 7% of the population of 1,155. Let's take a moment to study this map from 1875. The area in pink was inhabited largely by Poles. The area in light blue was inhabited mostly by Belarusians, and the region marked in green was populated primarily by Ukrainians. Like little islands, the small areas marked in gray were populated mostly by Jews. Thus, we can see that the Jewish population was concentrated in small districts widely scattered across this large region. We can also see all of the communities that we are considering today. Here is Bialystok and the nearby unidentified district that must be Zabludowa, both in Poland. Bronsk is to the southwest, also in Poland, and to the east is Brest-Litovsk, just across the border in Belarus. After the Prussians were defeated by Napoleon in 1807, Bronsk was assigned to Russia and remained part of the Tsarist Empire until the revolution in 1917, when it was assigned to Poland. As the commercial center of the district, Bronsk became an attractive place for Jewish settlement. In 1816, Jews established a kahila, or community congregation, settling in the central part of town near the market square. By 1897, Jews accounted for 58% of the town's 4,100 residents, or almost 2,400 people. However, poverty forced many to emigrate, and most went to the U.S. At the start of the 20th century, 4 organizations of immigrants from Bronsk had been formed in America. By 1914, Jews constituted 51% of the town's population of 4,300. There were calls for Poles to boycott Jewish stores. Tense relations were exacerbated by the Polish-Soviet War and the belief among some Poles that the Jews were pro-Bolshevik and thus hostile to Polish independence. A radical nationalist youth group organized an often violent boycott of Jewish tradesmen and craftsmen. During the Tsarist regime, Jewish artisans formed half of all the artisans in the Pale. They were more heavily represented in shtetls than in the main cities, and the number of those employed in traditional crafts remained high. 2/3 of Jewish artisans were involved in textile-related activities. Tailoring was attractive as it required no large investment of capital and catered to a mass market. Now let's take a look at Brest-Litovsk, capital of the Brest district in Belarus, an ancestral home to Branch 6's Zuckerman family, and also the birthplace of former Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin. Here we see Brest-Litovsk on the Belarus side of the border with Poland. To the west is the Bug River, which flows through the center of town. Brest has been a robust city for several centuries and now has some 325,000 residents, making it somewhat larger than Bialystok, which has a population of about 300,000. Jews first settled in Brest in the late 1300s and were granted a generous charter under which Jewish merchants traded in textiles and furs, while others engaged in commerce, crafts, and agriculture. It was referred to as the Venice of Lithuania. The influential Saul Wall established a synagogue there. Wall was a wealthy and politically influential Polish Jew who was said to have briefly occupied the throne of Poland on August 18, 1587. He has historically borne the nickname king for a night. This story may or may not be true. For many generations, Brest-Litovsk took the lead in community affairs and cultural activities of Lithuania. After its incorporation into Russia in 1793, its economic importance diminished. I'd like to highlight a few points on this map. First, Poland's capital city of Warsaw is to the west. Northeast of Warsaw is Bialystic. Across the border to the east is Minsk, the capital of Belarus, and to the southeast is Kiev, the capital of Ukraine. Back in Poland is Chelm, made famous by the author Isaac Bashevis Singer as the Shtetl of Fools. Many historic edifices in the Jewish quarter of Brest, including an old synagogue and a cemetery, were destroyed to make way for the building of a large fortress in 1832. After the completion of the Dnieper-Bug Canal in 1841, the Jewish community, which handled most of the city's commerce and industry, began to grow. I'd like to point out the location of Chernobyl in northern Ukraine. It was in the news after suffering a large-scale nuclear power plant accident in 1986. Chernobyl is only about 100 kilometers or 60 miles from Kiev. Brest saw the establishment of a tobacco factory, 2 large mills, a hospital, a new synagogue, and a home for widows in the mid-1800s. The Jewish population grew from 8,000 in 1847 to 27,000 in 1889, out of a total population of 41,600, for a percentage of 65%. Many of the Jews were artisans, chiefly shoemakers and tailors. There were vicious pogroms in the wake of the 1905 revolution, possibly triggered by the fact that Jews had been active in underground revolutionary groups. Although Jews comprised 70% of the population before World War I, they had only 3 representatives on the municipal council, while there were 20 non-Jewish members. In 1921, the Jewish population numbered about half of the city's 30,000 people. For several years, the deputy mayor was a Jew, and the town included other prominent Jews, including a Talmudist, a pioneer farmer in Palestine, journalists, an author-physician, and a philologist. Philology resides at the intersection of literary criticism, history, and linguistics. It may be worth noting that Brest is also known by other names. Several theories attempt to explain the origin of the city's name. One is that it is from the Slavic root beresta, meaning birch or bark. Another is that it is derived from the Lithuanian word brasta, meaning ford, as in the ford of a river. Located at the confluence of the Mukhavets and Bug rivers, the city was also known as Brest on the Bug. Once a center of Jewish scholarship, the city's Yiddish name is Brisk, and its residents are Briskers. I was not able to determine if this name is linguistically related to beef brisket, but the thought is certainly tantalizing. Finally, we turn our attention to Zabludovo, the home of siblings William and Mindela Srolevich of Branch 9. Here is a 1913 photo of my father Leo, age 5, and my grandfather Willie, age 33. Here are photos of Miriam Garber Srolevich, the Marinkers' youngest child, and her husband Herschel Srolevich, who were Willie's parents and my great-grandparents. The Polish pronunciation of the shtetl would be Zabłudów. In Yiddish, it would be Zabludovo. In today's chaotic world, we might be tempted to say Zabludovo. I wonder if residents are called Zabludniks. Probably not. It pleases me, though, that Grandpa Herschel appreciates my humor and that his name was bestowed on me as my middle name. Located in Bialystic County, 15 miles southeast of the capital and 7 miles west of the tiny hamlet of Malinka, Zabludovo was founded in 1553 when an annual fair and a weekly outdoor market were established. In the 17th century, it hosted guilds of tailors, shoemakers, and potters. Agriculture was developed by Protestant and Jewish settlers, as was the textile industry. In 1807, the village was passed from Prussia to the Russian partition of Poland. Russification began, which eventually led to a cholera epidemic brought to the village by Russian troops. Zabludovo was home to a thriving Jewish community for hundreds of years and was the site of the famed Zabludovo Synagogue, a wooden structure of a type that was unique to the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, built in 1637. It is believed that Jews had always constituted a majority of the population. Before World War II, the village had its famous synagogue, plus 5 prayer houses. The synagogue was built of larch wood without the use of nails. Its 3-story roof was a true masterpiece of the carpentry trade. Tragically, it was burned to the ground by Nazi troops on June 25, 1941, immediately after they occupied the village. During the 19th century, the number of Jews increased from about 1,800, representing 50% of the population, to 2,600, or 68% of the population. The total population increased from 3,600 to 4,000 during this time. At the present time, Zabludovo is home to about 2,500 people in an area of 5.5 square miles. The road labeled Bialystok leads to Bialystok, about 15 miles to the northwest. In the second half of the 19th century, Jews established weaving and spinning mills, as well as leather processing shops there. Jewish workers began to organize at the turn of the 20th century, forming a cell of the Zionist Socialist Workers' Party in 1906. Emigration to the U.S., Argentina, and Chile began in the 1880s and swelled after 1905 and 1914, certainly influenced by the ongoing pogroms. Willie emigrated in 1904 and Mindela in 1906. It is impossible to ignore the existence of several waves of pogroms leveled against the Jewish populations of Eastern Europe during this period. Pogrom is a Russian word meaning a violent attack, accompanied by the destruction of life and property, perpetrated by one section of the population against another. It has come to mean horrific attacks carried out by Christians against Jews between 1881 and 1921, while police and military forces stood by or actively provided support to the terrorists. The Jews of Russia were the victims of 3 large-scale waves of pogroms, occurring from 1881 to 1884, 1903 to 1906, and 1917 to 1921. A pogrom took place in Brest-Litovsk in June of 1905, and a more destructive one occurred in Bialystok in June of 1906, in which 80 Jews were murdered and much property was damaged and destroyed by rampaging mobs. Direct responsibility for the pogroms were placed on the authorities, including police and military forces. These actions were at the very least condoned by Tsars Alexander III, who ruled from 1881 to 1894, and Nicholas II, who ruled from 1894 to 1917. An atmosphere of terror prevailed in the Pale of Settlement as pogroms were perpetrated in 64 cities and towns and in hundreds of villages and hamlets. Much of the violence took place in Ukraine and the Russian province of Bessarabia, and to a lesser extent in Poland, Lithuania, and Belarus. Pogroms were largely brought to a halt with the downfall of the Tsarist regime in 1917, although there were subsequent outbreaks in Kiev, Minsk, Pinsk, and Lvov as late as 1921. The pogroms stimulated a great nationalist awakening among the Jews of Europe, which encouraged the development of organized self-defense movements and accelerated Jewish emigration to the U.S., Canada, South America, and Palestine. At this point in our presentation, I'd like to take a moment to briefly talk about the medium we have been seeing, and one that is close to my heart, photography. The following group of photos were all taken by Alter Sholem Katzesnet, a Jewish writer, critic, and photographer who lived from 1885 to 1941 in Eastern Europe. Just as photography, presented to the world in Paris in 1839, was becoming a commercially successful mass phenomenon, it developed into a new art form. Some of the earliest and most important artists working in the Russian Empire were Jewish. It should not be surprising that Jews entered freely into this new field of endeavor, as there were no laws or institutions to deny them entry. Jews and other marginalized groups, such as women, were denied easy access to careers in the older, more established art forms. With its relatively unfettered culture, photography was more likely to welcome these groups into its ranks. Another Jew who has achieved international acclaim for his photography of the Old Country was Roman Vishniak, here shown with his daughter, who lived from 1897 to 1990. His magnificent photographs have added a rich broth to this visual stew. Now, with a minimum amount of commentary, I'd like to show some examples of the fine arts and crafts that were produced by Jewish artisans in Eastern Europe during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The Holy Ark inside an old synagogue. A Kiddush cup. An interior detail of the famous Zabludova wooden synagogue. A Torah shield. Headstones at the Mikolovo Cemetery. A loom for making brocade, also known as a Spanier machine. A banner of the Bootmakers Guild. A medallion showing the Brest Yeshiva. A Torah crown showing the signs of the zodiac. And 4 paintings by the incomparable Marc Chagall, born Moshe Chagall in Belarus near the Polish border, who lived, mostly in France, from 1887 to 1985. This painting is called Butcher, which was apparently inspired by his grandfather. This one is entitled A Jew in Bright Red. This next one is called Music Fiddler and was an obvious inspiration of Fiddler on the Roof. And this painting is called My Father, done in 1914, all created by the artist Marc Chagall. During the course of my research for this project, I assembled a collection of portraits that I'd like to share with you now, with only brief identification. 2 men in a shtetl. A boy, photo by Vishniak. Shabbos preparation in the kitchen. An unidentified woman. 2 Jews of Latvia. Pogrom victims sheltering in a shul. A man on the street. And a woman in her window, photos by Vishniak. A bridal couple. An outdoor quintet. A woman walking on a cobblestone street, photo by Vishniak. A boy reading. A class of girls with their teacher. An old couple at home. A group of girls dressed as gypsies for Purim. A newspaper seller. A rabbi dressed for prayer. 2 women on the street. A woman with 4 children from Zabludova. Buying herring for Shabbos. Photo by Vishniak. A Torah celebration. A Melamed, or teacher, with his pupils. A porter, with his rope that he'd use for moving heavy objects. A water carrier, an important occupation in an era prior to indoor plumbing. 3 quarry workers. A Cheder-Bacher, or student at Hebrew school, photo by Vishniak. 3 women, 1 a Rebbitzin, or rabbi's wife. A woman with a print skirt. A girl sheltering her younger brother. And a child. Velvel's life penetrated the era of photography by only about 15 years, and Chaya Rachel's life by some 40 years. Therefore, it is entirely likely that both of them, living as they did in the hamlet of Malinka and the Pale of Jewish settlement in the middle of the 19th century, were never photographed. Or if they did by chance sit for an itinerant photographer or visit a studio in Bialystic, those images have surely been forever lost during the course of nearly 2 tumultuous centuries. But wouldn't it be wonderful to find a tintype or a cabinet card portrait of them similar to these? However, that uncertainty shouldn't stop us from speculating. What did they look like, Velvel and Chaya Rachel? How did they dress? What did their inn look like? Who were their customers? Did they serve vodka? Long a favorite in the Russian Empire and at the time a form of liquid hard currency? We will never know for certain, of course, but I've been able to find some images that might help us guess. Here are 2 pictures of early 19th century shtetl inns, both featuring a large doorway to permit the entry of horses and a small balcony opening out from the 2nd story. One might call them drive-in inns. There is also this depiction of an Eastern European tavern interior. Note the large samovar behind the bar and the wide variety of dress, headgear, and expression worn by the patrons. Then there are these depictions of shtetl innkeepers. To my eyes, this couple bears more than a passing resemblance to siblings Michal and Libby Garber, the 3rd and 6th children of Velvel and Chaya Rachel. Finally, there is this reproduction of an oil painting of a 19th century Jewish innkeeper from the exhibition Treasures of Jewish Galicia. One must admire the rapt and loving attention with which this gentleman serves his customers, most likely serving them vodka. I'd like to end with this photo, a favorite environmental portrait from my long career in photography, showing my great-uncle Abe Roll enjoying a cool one at the 1980 Rivka family jubilee. May we all raise a glass and drink a toast to our beautiful Rivka family and all its members, including those who are here with us and those who are long departed. L'chaim and shalom.
Well, thank you so much. That was just wonderful. Just
I'm glad you
wonderful.
enjoyed it.
And Ira is with us today. His cousin Russ was not able to join us. But if you'd like to unmute yourselves, we can sort of open this up to questions. And I would say we probably don't have to be too formal about it. I think everybody can kind of, maybe raise a hand and just start speaking, and we can have some discussion.
I'm happy to answer questions that you may have, and I'll do my best to answer them truthfully. Let's put it that way.
I just want to say it's a stunning accomplishment, Ira, to pull that together in such a cohesive way, that brings it alive, yet tells your personal story. I'm just in awe of what you've pulled together. A picture and tells a story. It's worth 1,000 words. So thank you.
Thank you, Esther.
Ira, what kinds of things did you do to research this?
Well, thank God for something called the internet. When I did my master's thesis in the late 1970s, we didn't have such a thing, but of course it makes it a lot easier, but the quantity of stuff can be kind of overwhelming. And so you have to just go through a lot of stuff and find what speaks to you. And we also had, I have, you've seen the cover of this book. It was in the film. But this book, Descendants of Velvel and Chavurah-Going, A Living Tree, and I'll show you how thick it is. And this has been put out by members of my family, particularly one cousin named Zalman Yusiskin. And by using this as sort of a jumping off point, I was able to find there are 9 branches in my family based on 9 children descended from the matriarch and patriarch Velvel and Chavurah. So there are 9 branches in this family. And I was able to select 3 because I thought all 9 would have been a bit much, and including branch 9 from which I am descended. And so that helped me focus my attention on those 3 communities. And with Russ's help, we worked together on this very much, even though he's on the West Coast and I'm here in Rochester. So we use this family history book as a jumping off point to help guide us in the various directions that we wanted to go in. And the story of Bialystic itself still needs to be told, because we were dealing just with those 3 smaller communities. But Bialystic itself is a city of about 300,000, so it's about the size of Buffalo. And it is the home of many of us, sort of Ashkenazic Jews. And so that's a story that still needs to be told.
Thank you.
Ira, your use of numerous medias and the music especially really brought your whole presentation home. It was really, really lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was Russ who found the music. And I agree, it especially towards the end. Music is so powerful, and especially the music of our people. When I was playing often Pripyat this morning, I was like, my God, I was just living that music. I was living inside the music, because I used to hear that as a child. And So yeah, the music adds so much. Of course, master of this medium is Ken Burns, and so we sort of had, he's way up there on a well-deserved pedestal.
Yeah.
But if we try to move in that direction, to do some serious research and to present it in a way that was informative and interesting to to viewers. I hope it didn't include too much stuff, but we just wanted to put it out there, and for just to have it be a kind of a relatively complete document of this thing.
How lucky your family is in perpetuity to have this.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
How did you find that? So my mother's family has been tracing their descendants, and they started out with 9 brothers. So it's quite a huge family tree but it's not like active like yours. It's like it's taken, I mean, they're just trying to flesh it out and locating people, but it seems like your family has been somehow together.
Yes. And I'd like to share a story with you about that. My dad was born in 1908. He's been gone for almost 30 years now. And when he was 20 months old, his mother, Rivka, died under very, very tragic circumstances. And leaving him as a 20-month-old child. And he had his father, my grandpa Willie, was still alive and active and well. But my dad was placed in foster homes, and so anyway, when my grandma Rivka died, unexpectedly, she was 25. And the family, which was in Chicago for the most part, was just completely floored by this. Here they were, making a new life for themselves in America. Recent immigrants, not speaking the language very well, English, working in sweatshops and, just struggling to get by. And my grandmother dies. And so the family was in a state of shock. And they really said, there may have been this is speculation, there may have been a feeling of guilt. How did we let this happen? And so what we know is that they formed this family circle, which is in Yiddish is called the Verband, or circle, union. I don't know what the best translation. Some of you Yiddishists can probably give me a little help on that, Verband. But so they formed the Rivka family Verband in 1910, which I think was the year she died. They immediately said, we cannot let this happen again. And so we will form a union, a group, a family circle, and we will meet. And my cousin, Uncle Matt, we called him Uncle Max Zuckerman, really became super active and in the formation of this circle, and he became the president, and there was, a board of directors. It was like real serious stuff. And it has persisted to this day. So in 1910, in 2010, we had the 100th anniversary of it. That picture that you saw at the end was of that Jubilee, so-called Jubilee, where there were over 350 people attending the Jubilee, all related through marriage and through direct descent from Velvel and Chavurah-Going. So we had this sort of shocking event in 1910 that propelled the family into this sort of place where they just needed to be together and to protect one another. And if somebody, was in ill health, or somebody was, in dire poverty, they would get help. And some family members were brought over from Europe who might not have been able to do it on their own. And that probably saved their lives. So it was a very powerful thing that happened that propelled it into existence, the family circle. And it persists to this day. We did miss, unfortunately, we did miss the Jubilee in 2020 because of COVID, but we are planning one for 2025. I'm on the advisory board. We advise the board of directors. And so this is a very well organized family. And we are committed to staying, staying together.
Ira, I'll step in with one question in this quiet for a moment. Toby Olson, echoing everything else that's been said, I think the story of your family will stick with me for a long time and the work that you did. I'm wondering, given all of the work, do you have any unanswered questions, actual other areas you want to fill in a little bit of information about your family?
Well, it's interesting that you should put it that way, Toby. Just last week, I was down in Sleepy Hollow, New York, visiting my sister for Thanksgiving. And my sister has got most of this, both of my parents are gone. And she has a lot of this stuff. She has a big, beautiful house, and she is able to keep things safely stored, mostly in her basement. And she has this trove of about 150 letters that my father wrote to my mother right after the war, when he was in Europe after the war, 1946, doing some work for a United Nations agency called UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, UNRRA. It's not that well known. And so he went to a displaced persons camp in Germany for survivors, people who survived the Holocaust. This was a camp for Jewish survivors of the war.
Yeah.
And his background was in sociology and psychology somewhat. And he went there completely on his own behest. No one was sending him there. He wanted and needed to go to help out these refugees, these people who had survived this unimaginable horror, the Holocaust. And so he was there for about a year. The war was over, but he was there trying to help these people that survived. And apparently he did visit Dachau before it was cleaned up. And he worked in this camp in Germany called Landsberg. It's in southern Germany near Munich. And, so we were going through some of these letters, and it's like, it's amazing what he experienced and how he expressed himself, and these letters that he sent to my mother. She was sending letters to him too. They were really corresponding, several times a week. They were sending letters to each other. We don't know what happened to her letters. Even if he obviously got them because he was responding to them, but whether he was able to keep them, being in Europe, traveling, sometimes in very dangerous situations, whether he was able to keep them, we don't know. But we do have most of his letters that he wrote to my mom. So my sister Rebecca, Rivka, she's named after Grandma Rivka. She and I were going over some of these letters, and it's just amazing insight into not only time, but also into my dad's mind and heart. Mm-hmm. And that's really a fascinating journey for both of us, me and my sister, to go on together.
Yeah.
Ira, we have a couple questions in the chat.
Let's see. Thank you. Okay. We post the title of the book in the chat. Sure. And do I think about publishing them? Them meaning, what is them?
The letters.
Oh, the letters, of course. Well, Rebecca and I don't know what we're going to do yet. We possibly a book, possibly a film. So that remains to be seen. But for now, we're going through them. We are transcribing them. My father wrote in a very scrawly longhand that she and I can kind of decipher most of it. And some of the letters are typed, which makes it a lot easier. And we're inputting it into Google Docs. And we will eventually have all 150 or so letters, transcribed in digital format. And then we'll have to, I don't know, we don't know yet. But it's amazing work. And I have been collecting books about the DP camps in post-war Europe. And also, I've been collecting information about Chicago in the early 20th century, where these people were living. When the Verband was, when my dad was born and when the Verband was created, and, so we're right now, my sister and I are kind of collecting information, and I'm hopeful that Russ is going to be able to help me make another film, but that's up to him. But I've also talked to a friend here in Rochester. I don't know if you guys know Julie Gelfand by any chance. She is also a photographer like I am. Do you know Julie? Yes. Yeah, good. I was just talking with her yesterday. We're in the same. We're in the same. We're in a group of photographers who meet. We've been meeting on Zoom for a long, long time, and now yesterday we met in person. It was great. So I was talking to her about all this stuff and said, and she's interested, and she's from a Jewish family. She can apparently trace at least part of her family back to the late 1400s. Wow. That blows my mind. But so anyway, I'm going to continue to talk to Julie about this and see if we can put something together. But at this point, we don't know what the product will be, but we know that, at least as far as my sister Rebecca and I, we started the process, and we're literally processing this information that my father sent to my mother. And a lot of it is, very informational. He was a very smart guy, very intuitive, very sensitive. And it's wonderful to see. And they were kind of relatively newlyweds when all this was happening. And so, a lot of lovey-dovey stuff between him and her that I never saw when I was a kid growing up. They got rid of that. So that's a whole other thing. What happened to the lovey-dovey stuff, Dad? Anyway, that's a little tangent there. But anyway, it's interesting just to see how he expressed himself and what he was thinking and what he was feeling. And by the way, he was still in his 30s when all this happened. He was over in Europe after the war, helping these displaced persons and doing all kinds of other really amazing stuff. He's in his 30s. It's like, wow.
Ira, how do you find the next generation, this next one and the newest generation, are they as enthusiastic about carrying on the traditions? Is it as meaningful to them as you get away from the original generations?
Well, that's a great question. And I don't have a real simple answer to that. I'm hopeful that they will want to continue. We baby boomers, we kind of picked up the mantle from our parents, the parents of the Depression and the war. So now we baby boomers, we're aging. And so we're trying to move the whole family, in some kind of a direction. And I don't have kids of my own, but I've helped raise some kids, but I don't have kids of my own. Anyway, my sister Rebecca has a couple of kids who are in their 30s, a boy and a girl. And they love going to the Jubilees. They're fun. There's so much stuff to do. And it's a wonderful experience. but whether they will continue that, as we get further and further away from the original, not only from the original matriarch and patriarch, who are long gone, but from the people who actually created the verband, they're gone too. But how long can we kind of keep this thing going? Now we do have this book, so a lot of work, and Zalman is sort of our generation. He's probably he's a little bit older than I am. He's, I guess, in his late 70s. I'm 73. He had done so much work here. And I'm wondering, what's going to happen he has this sort of institutional memory. Now he's put it into this book. What happens when he goes? So how do you communicate everything that you have learned and studied? How do you actually communicate that to future generations? Well, a book is a great idea. A film is a great idea. So you do what you can to preserve, and protect, and then present what you have understood about your life and the life of your peers. Put it out there in some kind of format that is of interest. On my mother's side of the family, there is a group in the Detroit area called the Descendants of David Horodok, which was the name of a shtetl in Belarus that my mother's family were descended from. And they are hugely active. So I happen to be, both, I'm primarily oriented to the story that I've told you on my father's side, but on my mother's side, from David Horodok, they've got a whole shtick going on too. So I've got it from both sides. And so I guess, I'm very lucky that way. Mm. But, what can we do? If we can do some kind of, get some kind of documentation of the people who are old and probably won't be with us that much longer. Do a kind of an interview, do a video interview. When my mom, several years before my mom died, she's been gone for 9 years now, a friend of mine did a video interview of her. And, she was in great health and good spirits. And she was, it was just great just to hear her story, actually captured in one place where she could actually speak in her own voice. And my friend Caroline did a super job with the video. And so I encourage people to get some kind of family history while people can still talk to us. And, and I love to do pictures. I'm a photographer by trade. I don't really do video professionally, but I do photography, and I've done it for a long, long time. And I love to take pictures of people, people who are maybe older, all people really, but especially maybe people who have been around the block a couple times and, probably won't be with us for much longer. I love to get their pictures because these are the definitive images of who we are. And so think in terms of your own families and, get your phone out or get a video camera out and just do an interview. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just, what was it like growing up during the Depression? Tell me some stories. What was it like during the war? What did you do? How did you feel? What was it like going to school? What were your friends like? Just stories. Just stories. It doesn't have to be anything of what you might consider historically significant. Just get some stories.
Well, that's a great suggestion. It's there's so much lost every day.
Absolutely.
And, yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. We are just thrilled to have you all here and be able to present this just wonderful, wonderful piece of work that you and your cousin have done, Ira.
Thank you.